Welcome into Inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak, and we're about a month away from training camp kicking off. So kind of in that dead period at this point of just looking for any little nugget of Saints news going on right now, and not much has filtered out currently.
No, and that's a good thing. For the second episode in a row, I do have to point this out for our YouTube audience. We have inadvertently matched colors. We didn't talk about it. Just happened, and I got my crawfish shirt on. I didn't go to any crawfish boils this year. I was just thinking about that. Did you get any crawfish this year?
I definitely a handful, and I got to experience ravioli in a crawfish boil for the first time, which is pretty cool.
It sounds terrible.
I love it,
but yeah, it's too hot now. It is way too hot now, and that's why I'm glad that this is the dead period. Because if we had to be standing out at practice in a day like this, or it's like heat advisory days, I might die.
That's when everyone's whining. Can't we go to the indoor facility?
I might change careers. No, it's dangerous. Like they probably would send them to the indoor facility because like this heat is not normal. Like it's the type of heat that I can't cool my house. I'm sweating inside because this is like the coolest it can get. But yeah. Hey, we're here. We're getting ready for camp. Hotels are booked, man. 26 days in an Irvine hotel room. And with the spirit of this episode, I do have to ask, what's the over-under on how many days before that starts to feel like a prison cell? Because it's under 26.
Well, I think at least you're in a location that there's plenty to do, obviously, in California. It's not like you're in...
Yeah, but I'm poor.
Right.
So how much of that could I actually do? Like, that was the thing. When we were out there for joint practices, the sticker shock of like... Yeah. Like even gas costs like $5 a gallon. Like I went to a movie and that was the cheapest beer I got the entire time I was out in Southern California. It was like $14. Like what a deal. Like, I need to find myself like a dive bar, but I am fully aware of the fact that like there's no such thing as like a true dive bar in Southern California. Maybe I'll go to like a Chili's.
You need to find a way to include pooch into your trip so at least it doesn't feel like a complete prison cell.
The dog?
Yeah, bring the dog out.
Yeah, I think it's just gonna put him in my carry-on bag, a 60-pound dog.
Yeah, sure. The Saints won't mind.
Claire would be happy. She's like, honestly, I don't think she's even gonna miss me. She's just like, but I have to walk the dog every day.
What is that?
And this dog gets like 3 long walks a day because I don't know. It's my hobby is walking the dog. Anyway, we are way off the plot here. This is a Saints podcast, and we're getting ready. Back. As we mentioned, there's not a ton to talk about. There's a few elements I want to get into in this first segment, but by and large, this is going to be the betting episode and not even really like good bets. We're just going to go through over-unders. We're going to talk some lines. There's some really funny lines for the Saints that I want to get into in the final segment. Second segment is going to be more of the individual over-unders. We're going to talk about, Derek Carr passing yards, Alvin Kamara, our expectations there. I spent the last couple of days kind of going around and finding every line on the Saints that I could. But there's just not a ton in terms of individuals because I think betting sites don't want to put a line out there that is kind of uninformed. And it's like, we don't even know if A.T. Perry is going to be on the roster. Like, obviously, there's a good chance, but they're not going to put a line out there that kind of gets negated by that. So we're going to talk through that. But in this first segment, I want to talk about a couple of things. The Saints, last episode, we talked about how they signed Rod Teamer as a cornerback. They also signed Mac McCain, another depth cornerback, and cut Nathan Latu. So that's the only real bit of news we have from the Saints. Mac McCain. It's a fun name. I'm going to enjoy saying it. I don't think he's going to make the roster, but that's going to be a name. And then obviously, as we mentioned, Rod Teamer. Nathan Latu is a guy we really never saw. And, wouldn't be surprised if he sticks around and ends up coming back when they clear some roster spots. But for now, he's not here. And,
a little bit of news too. The Saints social media team put out quite a few photos of Chase Young working out. And, well, you just got to be impressed with how impressive of a physical specimen he is. And seems to be on the right track coming back from this neck injury. Sure, he certainly looks in shape.
We in the biz call that a thirst trap. And so let's take a look at that. We're gonna pop it up here. But yeah, Chase,
muscles upon muscles,
muscle man over here. It is funny because like I mean, good looking guy. looks like he's in really good shape. And that's going to be a question when you deal with the neck surgery. Like, what is it? Like, how long does it take you to get back into NFL shape? But my question is he just the new Zion Williamson? Is it like every offseason he's here, we're just going to post a couple photos and like, oh my God, he looks like a monster, and then move on? That's a good question. But yeah, Saints social media team hitting us with the thirst trap during this dead period. And I can't blame them.
No, making us sweat looking at that body for sure. And it makes you jealous. But I think that's obviously a great sign. You see him obviously in peak shape already. Then the other thing is obviously when he's cleared to get back on the practice field is getting into that football shape we all talk about.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if you're able to do a lot of this conditioning work, you're probably getting pretty close to being able to get back on the field, particularly for these unpadded practices, because you're really not hitting each other anyway. Now, full speed padded practices, team drills, that might be a little bit further down the road, but for now, I'm okay with it. Rest of the time in this segment, I want to talk about Chris Olave, and we got a clip from the Reception Perception podcast. It was in our feed. If you want to listen to the full episode on the podcast player, you can go check that out. For the YouTube audience, I didn't want to throw a clip in here. And this is James Koh. And I always want to say Mark Harmon, but it's not Mark Harmon. He's the guy from NCIS. It's Matt Harmon. Although I did find out that Mark Harmon was a quarterback at UCLA. So I don't know, do with that information what you will. But this is those two dudes talking about Chris Olave and kind of expectations in this offense and why the last 2 years didn't make a ton of sense. And so let's hit that.
I think you could argue that while it's kind of outrageous that all three of these top receivers from this draft class, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Chris Olave, they've all had kind of bad environments to start their careers. I think it's pretty easy to see why the first two, Wilson and London, have been held back by their quarterback situations and some just the overall offensive ecosystem.
Coaching.
I tell you, man, I watched that Saints offense last year, and it's like right up there in terms of not
it's hard. It's
well
terrible.
designed. It was a rough watch. Especially last season, and not even touching the Derek Carr part of it, like just putting Carr to the side. Chris Olave, as a rookie, ran 7.4% of his routes were slants as a rookie. That is the lowest I've ever charted for a player since 2014.
That's crazy.
And we're talking hundreds of individual seasons,
insane.
Tens of thousands of routes. And last year it jumps up to 13.4%, which is not a beefy number at all. So this is a guy that's run a very downfield-oriented route tree, a route tree that really lacks in layup routes. And despite that, he's been a really strong separator through his first two seasons, especially against press man coverage, where he's at the 87th percentile against man and 82nd against press last year.
Yeah, you would think that the scouting report would be, again, if you have Chris Olave and you're asking him to run all these downfield routes, and this is the offensive base that you have established for yourself as a New Orleans Saints and Pete Carmichael, right? Why on God's green earth would you then go and get Derek Carr? Like, this is what I don't understand, right? And again, by the way, his quarterback profile is up on the site. And can I be 100% honest? I had my concerns regarding this whole Derek Carr, Chris Olave mix, when they signed Derek Carr, because again, the work that you did here on the Olave profile, and then the work that our guy Derek Klasser did on Derek Carr, and you look at the two profiles and you say to yourself, this isn't going to work in its current form, right? Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely how it worked out, right? So Derek Carr has, Derek Carr with a 36.4% success rate on the 9 route, 37.5% success rate on the corner, 50% success rate on the post. If these sound low, it's because they are, right? These are not good numbers, right? Meanwhile, you've got Chris Olave on the other side really doing damage and running a lot of nines. In 2022, he ran almost 20% of his routes were 9 routes. 11% of his routes were post routes. Another 6% on the corner. So you add that all up. I mean, we're talking almost 40% of his routes were again, of the deeper variety. You go inside Derek Carr, but you don't change the offense. Matt, that doesn't make sense to me.
All of these receivers, I think, could get a little bit of a boost here with this change in offense, because like my biggest thing when I watched the Saints offense, it still felt like a unit that was sort of like needed to be manned by a Hall of Fame quarterback, like a Drew Brees type, which isn't surprising because Pete Carmichael, for the most part, he was kind of the second in command, like Sean Payton's, totally. his henchman, right, or his first mate during that experience. But he'd been there throughout the entire Peyton, Breeze, Saints run, and it just felt like that offense was still stuck there. Now you bring this group in with Clint Kubiak, who we've seen Clint Kubiak call plays before. It definitely just more akin to typical Shanahan stuff. I think we're going to see a lot of that with this offense, and then it's really fascinating to kind of consider how that maps onto these players, especially Chris Olave, because there's going to be a lot more pre-snap motion. This team was dead last in motion at the snap. Like the way all of these teams are trending towards, hey, we've got a guy running full speed as the ball is being snapped. And like he's got a full head of steam. Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins, right? He runs those little like cheat out motions and then rips back in the middle of the field. Why can't Chris Olave do that? Why can't Rashid Shaheed do that? That's what I think is interesting. Just like mapping Olave, who to bring it to the RP profile, like yes, he has great success rate on out routes. Yeah, great success rate on 9 routes, curl routes, and stuff like that. But why can we not get this guy moving full speed and running a route that's crossing over the middle of the field? Because then if you're Derek Carr and you're under center, you're in shotgun, whatever, you're heating up because you've got pressure, because maybe they're still working out what their offensive line is going to look like, and he's just a guy who's always had a quick trigger finger. Instead of I'm dumping it to Alvin Kamara in the flat, my first read is going to be open on a design target here in Chris Olave. And then let's see what Olave can do after the catch, because he's never been a big after catch player. He's never going to be a tackle breaker, but he's also never going to get a lot of opportunities, run a bunch of damn out routes and curl routes.
But yeah. And so one thing they talked about that I think is very relevant is the last 2 years, you just didn't see a lot of what they refer to as layup routes for Chris Olave. It was a lot of nines, a lot of goes, a lot of corner routes, a lot of deep downfield breaking routes. And, whether that was because you were designing this offense to have Michael Thomas in it, whether it was kind of this kind of layover from the Drew Brees era and you never really adjusted, the stuff that Derek Carr does well and the stuff that Chris is elite at never really meshed. They never really came together. And so, as we're getting kind of into this betting episode and talking about over-unders and lines, that's the part of the game that I think when you bring Chris Olave into this mix, into this new offense, the biggest change to me will be a lot more action 10 to 12 yards from the line of scrimmage as opposed to 25 to 30 yards from the line of scrimmage. You're going to get a lot more close breaking routes. You're going to get a lot more catch and run opportunities. And that's the reason when I look at these lines, which Chris Olave's over-under on yardage from DraftKings was not 30, was 1,099 yards. Now, whether that's in part because people are really down on the Saints or whatever, I mean, that's a no-brainer over to me. Even like that's not me saying I think this offense is going to blow people away. Who else is catching passes? Like, where is the yardage going? It's got to go to Olave and to a lesser extent Shaheed and then Juwan and then Alvin, whatever. Like, just from the design of this offense alone, from what we have seen and the yak opportunities you should be trying to get Chris Olave, he should blow by that mark. And the only question is by how much.
Yeah, I don't know if, injuries are a concern for that, but it does seem low to me for a number. I would be comfortable with taking the over on him then. What was it, 1,100 yards last season? I think close to that.
He cleared that last year and missed 2 games.
Right.
So,
no, it just seems like you said, it seems a bit off just because he is clearly number one. And then you really do have a lot of questions. Obviously, Shaheed's number 2, but then after that, so many questions on who else fills out this wide receiving core. And Chris being that guy, we're hoping and expecting that leap in year 3 to go, even further for him. And would definitely expect a lot more from him. Like you mentioned, too, with the yards after catch in this Clint Kubiak scheme is definitely something to be excited about.
Yeah, I mean, year 1, he had 72 catches. Year 2, he had 87 catches. And keep in mind, that was a year 2 in which you went into it with the idea that Mike Thomas is going to be your number 1.
Right.
The design of the offense at its core was based on that idea. You still caught 87 passes. You had Mike Thomas for 9 games and 1 drive. And so like that's half the season, right? You spent half the season as the number 2 and then half the season as the number 1. And we have seen Chris, when given those opportunities as the number 1 receiver, really shine. I mean, look at like one of his best games of the season last year was against the Falcons. And I think he got hurt on the first drive of the second half, right? Like he already had 100 yards receiving. He was on pace. He was going to go for like 250 in that game. They could not cover him. And he got hurt. Obviously, I think it was a concussion. You know, it was one of those situations that people complained about, hospital balls or whatever. It was just a high ball to the outside. You know, I think that one of the questions when you talk about Chris's stats is going to be, okay, can he stay healthy throughout the course of the season? Can he avoid, you know, he had concussions in his rookie and second season. And both are in situations that like you can complain and say it's on Derek Carr. I think to an extent, you got to, as a player, protect your head when you're going to the ground. Because both times it was not like he got sent over the middle of the field and got blown up. Like that's one where you could say you shouldn't have thrown that ball in the first place. When you're just giving a guy a 50-50 ball to go up and get, he's got to be able to come down and protect his head. And both times, one was against the Seahawks where he kind of came down and went hard into the ground. That was a concussion. I think it was his first touchdown. Falcons were, again, it was just going up, kind of got knocked out of the air and went down on his head. And like you can say, hey, that the quarterback has to protect him more. I don't know. Like I want the quarterback to feel like he can throw a jump ball to Chris Olave. So that's just a situation where, you know, you got to learn from that, right? Like as a receiver, you got to understand where you can be and how to protect yourself. This quarterback also has a lot of responsibility in where he delivers the ball. I just don't think that throw in particular is one where you look at it and you say, oh, this is the quarterback's fault. Now, there were a good number of balls throughout the course of the season that you could say like, yeah, that should have been delivered somewhere else. It was a little late. It was a little behind him. And, you know, that's on the quarterback. I don't think that was one of them. But either way, we'll continue. Because those are the type of catches that I know Chris can make. And he can get up in the air. What I want to see is more of these easy kind of layup routes across the middle of the field. And you look at it and you say, okay, why is his yak so low? In year 1, you're talking about 72 catches, only 210 yak yards. And even that seems high. It was 2.9 yards per catch based on what we saw, right? Year 2, 347 yak yards on 87 catches. You're looking more 4 yak yards per catch. I want to see that number closer to 5 or 6. You know, he's had 557 yak yards over 2 seasons. I would really love to see his yak be closer to 500 yards. I would almost like to see him do that in 1 year. And because of that, I think that's where you're going to see his ability. You know, you're talking about 87 catches. I'd like to see that number get in that range, you know, maybe closer to 95. He averaged 12.9 yards a catch. I'd love that to be closer to 15. And if you're talking about 90 catches, 15 yards per reception, you're looking at 1,350 yards. And to me, that's the goal. If I'm looking at Chris and I'm saying, what is my reasonable goal for him this year? I want to see 90 to 95 catches. I want to see 1,300 to 1,400 yards. Because that's what you need your wide receiver 1 to do in an offense.
Are you hoping for double-digit touchdowns? You think in the 8-9 range?
Well, see, that's a completely different question. And, you know, the touchdowns, we're going to get into these touchdown bets here in the next segment. But, like, those are so contingent on, okay, did you get tackled at the 1 or did you get into the end zone, right? Like, I don't see Chris being this elite red zone weapon. So if you end up in the short red zone inside the 10 frequently, I don't think that's going to be a good recipe for him to pile up touchdowns. Now, if you can get 30-yard catch and run touchdowns, then sure. But in several instances last year, you saw him get down to the goal line, get tackled, and then you ran it in. So it's tough. I don't think that the touchdowns are necessarily an indicator of did he have a successful season or not. That said, you know, what did he have? 4 touchdowns year 1, 5 touchdowns year 2. I would like to see, I would be disappointed if you didn't see 6 or 7. Double digits is tough. Like Mike Thomas, I don't think he ever had double-digit touchdowns in his career. And he was that kind of elite contested catch guy, a guy that you should be able to throw the ball to in traffic in a phone booth. So I don't know. It's tough. It's a completely different offense. I don't know why I'm even comparing the two. But what I'm looking at is, okay, 1,100 yards for Chris Olave should be the bottom of the barrel. If you only get to 1,100 yards this year, one of two things has happened. Either this offense struggled mightily or you were hurt for 3-4 games.
Yeah, to me, a reason I asked about the touchdowns was just because, that progression of 4-year 1, 5-year 2, definitely hoping, obviously, to increase that year number 3. And to me, it was right in that double-digit range of around 8-9 touchdowns. I think I'm expecting for this season from Olave, at least.
That's kind of the thing. The big question is how many points does this offense put up, right? Because it's tough because you got to get the ball to Alvin. You got to get the ball to Taysom, who's going to vulture a lot in the red zone, as he always has and will continue to do. You got to get the ball to Jawan. So, I mean, it's I don't know. Like, again, I'm just not as confident on the touchdowns in terms of, I think the over-under for Chris on touchdowns from DraftKings was 5.5.
Wow.
So I'd bet that. I'd bet over 5.5, but I'd feel close. I feel like it's that one to me is a questionable bet, whereas over 1099, which is the current
yardage
betting pros yardage, I think I saw 1150 from somewhere else. I'm still taking that. Like 1,200 yards for Chris Olave this season should be a layup. When you consider he almost got there with Andy Dalton throwing in the ball in a season where he wasn't the primary until week 5, and even then he was a rookie trying to figure it out in real time. Like, this is an offense that I look at more like Brandon Ayuk's season last year. I think he had 75 catches and he was well over 1,000 yards. Let's see. I want to see. Brandon Ayuk's numbers are pretty wild when you look at it. And a guy that who knows if he's going to be back on the 49ers. 75 catches, 1,342 yards, 7 touchdowns. He had an average of 17.9 yards per catch. That's what I want. That's what I expect Chris to be closer to. Now, 1,300 yards on 75 catches is crazy in terms of the production and the efficiency there. I don't think you're going to expect him to be close to 18 yards a catch. I want to see Chris be closer to 15, 16 yards per catch, in which case you're looking at 90 catches to 1,300 yards. But I think, like, when you kind of look at, okay, how did Brandon get to those numbers? I think that's what you're hoping Chris can do in this new offense that is a lot more like what Brandon was doing with the 49ers.
No, yeah, I definitely think the arrow up for Olave number-wise is it should, like you mentioned, it just, that seems like a natural, easy progression. And with the yardage, catches, it seems like a layup that it should be an over there.
He has to be the star of this offense.
Has to, right?
Right. Like, at least a passing game. Who else is it going to be? Like, even if the Saints struggle mightily and lose a ton of games, he's still putting up yardage, right? So, all right, let's wrap that up. We're going to go the rest of this podcast and not talk nearly as much about Chris Olave, but I did want to get to it because to me, that's the lock bet of this entire offseason. It's like whatever you're getting, because I think when we get closer to the season when there gets to be some more reporting done about how this offense is looking and the sports books kind of catch up, I think that number is going to tick up, especially if you try to get it after like week 3. But for now, that to me is the most gettable line of this offseason for the Saints. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back. We're going to talk more about some individual over-unders with Shaheed, Alvin Kamara, some of these other guys. And then we're going to dive into some really weird bets. Like, do the Saints score a touchdown in every game this season? If you think the answer is yes, you'd get some really good odds on that. And I do want to look back and say, like, okay, what did they do last year?
Yeah,
because it does seem like they scored a touchdown in most games. I can think of one where they didn't. So we're going to talk about stuff like that. It's going to be, this is a bottom of the barrel type day, man. And take what you can. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. Who dat? We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. We're continuing on this betting episode of Inside Black and Gold. Now, if you're looking at it and saying, I don't gamble, why do I want to listen to this? I don't know. I don't bet on most of these lines either. I just find it interesting to kind of look at it and say, this is what the general public thinks this person's going to do. Like, this is kind of the guess of, like, this is what they're going to do. And you're betting on whether it's wrong or not, And so whether you put money on it or not, I just think the conversation is good to have, particularly when we get down to, like, the coach of the year odds, which are very funny to me. But first things first, we're going to go through kind of the over-unders on some key players. So let's start with Derek Carr. Betting Pros has him at the over-under for passing yardage at 3,500, technically 3,449. And, that's a tough one, because if you look at Derek's career, he surpassed that basically every season. So I think this is just another good example of like, people don't know quite what to do with this Saints offense. But just for perspective, right? Last year, in a year where you would not say the offense was particularly impressive, you had 3,878 passing yards. He also missed the second half, the majority of the second half against the Packers, the majority of the second half against the Vikings, and the fourth quarter against the Lions. So you're talking about basically in 16 games,
right?
You put up 3,800 passing yards. So that gives you a game cushion. Now, I think you're going to run the ball a lot more in this offense, and maybe that's what's being baked in here. But 3,500 yards for a guy who has thrown for over 3,500 yards in every season of his career, but 2014 with the Raiders, his rookie season, and then again in 2017. I don't know. That seems like a pretty safe bet to me.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable taking the over there. Hopefully the increase, obviously, in the run production will help only even more in the passing game here. And like you mentioned, if you look at his numbers, it's pretty good. It seems like a safe bet to go over. What is it? What's 3,500?
Technically 3,450.
3,450. Yeah, I'd be comfortable taking 3,450 for Carr in the over.
Yeah, and if you at 3,450, he's literally done that in every year of his career, other than his rookie season. So I don't know. And then the year that he didn't, he only played 15 games. So even in that 2017 season, he played in 15 games, not 16. So I don't know. That's a tough one. And 21.5 touchdowns. That's what DraftKings has him at. Now the question becomes, okay, if you are running the ball more effectively, does that take away from the passing game? And I don't know, like that, it's not a zero-sum game of like, well, there's this many yards, and if you run for more, then you throw for less. I think that the running game being more effective, assuming that it's more effective, that should extend drives, right? Like, so you should have more opportunities if you're running the ball. Like, you're not failing on third and short constantly. So I don't know. That's a question to me. But part of that is, okay, what is Alvin Kamara? What is his production? Do you have him? Have you figured out that contract situation, right? Or does it go off the rails? Either way, you look at Alvin Kamara and his totals, 649 rushing yards. That's a lot. I'm not sure about that.
Just rushing yards you're saying there.
Yeah, just rushing yards.
Yeah, I would think that hopefully more involvement with Jamal and Kendra Miller would take away from the rushing yards part of that. And I know last year, obviously being a down year for Alvin altogether, just the entire run game, I would, and my concerns with the O-line. And I would definitely consider under there. I was worried I was going to start taking over on all these bets, considering, it's like, oh, I'm being a Saints homer here because I think Carr goes over 21 passing. But yeah, that for rushing yards for Alvin seems a tad high, considering a lot of other factors. My biggest question, like I said, is the O-line.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's tough because Alvin has cleared that mark in every year of his career, even last year. So a lot of these are set low, and I think part of that is, okay, well, the betting sites don't exactly know how to gauge this offense. And so they're erring on the side of it's not going to be good. And that's fair. I get it. But it is tough. Like, they're making it difficult for you to bet the under. And I think that's because, in the local market, you're looking at it and saying, well, why would Alvin be worse than last year? Because you are very keenly aware of the fact that, like, I don't think he had a great year last year. He still had 694 rushing yards. And so I think this is kind of a sign that outside of the local market, there's a lot of energy being put toward, I want to hammer the unders. I want to hammer all these unders because I have no faith in the Saints. And so it becomes difficult to bet the under when you kind of watch it and you're like, okay, what, so Alvin looks fine. What would have to happen for him to not clear that mark? And I would say injuries, probably. But that's not unnecessarily unlikely. We've seen him get hurt. We've seen him miss games. He missed week 18 last year. But I don't know. I'm still probably betting the over. I'm still being a homer on these bets. It's just really hard for me to justify, okay, he's been in the league all these years. He's been in the league 7 years, and he has never rushed for fewer than 694 yards. Does he fall off a cliff this year? Is this the year? Or is he kind of revitalized? That's the tough one.
Yeah,
I would probably be closer on a total yards bet where I feel more confident because he's going to get used. I just don't know how much he's going to be used in the straight up rushing game.
Right. And I mean, obviously, with Clint Kubiak coming in, you would hope that usage is going to be very similar to a guy like Christian McCaffrey. But obviously, things are a little different here.
Yeah, although I wouldn't say that the 49ers have a world-beating offensive line either, and so he was able to figure it out. I don't know. That's one that I'm just not going to touch because I just don't know where Alvin Kamara is right now, literally and figuratively in terms of that contract situation.
Did you happen to get his, what do they have his total yardage for on the season around?
No, they didn't. It's tough to get receiving lines on running backs right now, and his was not on any of the sites that I looked at. I would guess it's pretty close to 1,000. I would guess that 1,100, 1,050 would be the total yards for him, and that would be kind of in line. Like last year, he had 466 receiving yards, 694 rushing yards. So that puts you a little over 1,100, and we'll see. He had 75 catches last year. His average, his yards per reception was 6.2. That is the lowest figure of his career. In 2019, he had 81 catches. That was his first 3 seasons in the NFL. He had exactly 81 catches in all 3 of those years. In 2019, it was 6.6. 2022 and 2023 or 2021, you're talking about 9.3, 8.6. So, that's my question from the receiving side of the equation is, can you get him more opportunities down the field? As opposed to, I think it was the Bucs game that he had 13 catches for 22 yards or something crazy.
Yeah.
The first Bucs game, the week 4 Bucs game, because he was just check down mania. That was his first game back from the suspension. And it was like, what the hell is going on? I've never seen anyone catch this many balls and have 22 receiving yards. A couple of those were passes behind the line of scrimmage where he lost 5 yards on.
Yeah.
But that's going to be a question. Going down the line, so we talked about Chris Olave. We don't have to talk about him again. One guy I'm really curious on is Rashid Shaheed. And I actually think you're going to see his production go down. And it's not about necessarily what he's doing. I just think that you're not going to attack downfield as much as you did in the Pete Carmichael offense. And his involvement there is going to be super important, but you look at the numbers from last year, 46 catches, 719 yards. I think you're going to see him kind of regress a little closer to year 1, at least from a targets perspective. And I think you're going to end up closer to 50 targets, 40 catches, 500 yards in that range. You're not going to see all of these downfield shots because people are going to be protecting against it in ways that they weren't last year. So I look at Rashid Shaheed, 675 receiving yards. That's tough for me. I don't know if you're going to get there. Now, I think you're going to see him used a lot more in creative ways. I think you're going to see him sent in motion. I think you're going to see more end arounds, maybe more rushing yards. But I don't see his receiving total being what he hit last year.
Yeah, that's tough. Obviously, you would think too, though, that they're going to obviously try and get him the ball in space more to create more yards after catch because he's got that ability. I do feel you though too. I think they're going to use him a lot of different ways. Even we're seeing, of course, in the kick return game where he'll be a factor there. Man, you said 650 is his total for yardage.
675 from Betting Pros.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good number for him, but I would lean towards taking the under on that one as well, just because of some other factors you have with got to get the ball to some other playmakers there, and you're going to have obviously Olave, Juwan Johnson, Taysom, Alvin to throw the ball to, and we'll see. There's going to be some targets, obviously, with a guy like Michael Thomas gone from this squad, but you're hoping
not for him. I don't think that's going to impact him.
Oh, I'm just hoping like A.T. Perry or somebody else ends up getting more looks.
Yeah, no, and I think and that's not to say his importance in the offense has changed. Like his ability to take the top off is going to open things up for a lot underneath. I just don't think that. I think that teams were kind of saying, okay, if he beats this, then he beats this last year, right? Like you got to pick your poison, and we're going to focus on Mike Thomas. We're going to focus on Chris Olave. We're going to focus on Alvin Kamara. You look at a game like the Colts game, right? I don't think that happens the same way again because he single-handedly took them apart in that game, right? On 3 catches. And so I just don't think you're going to see teams allow him to go one-on-one nearly as often as they probably did last year. And so either way, like I'm interested to see, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get more work close to the line of scrimmage. And that's like, you're talking about all these deep shots and all these long touchdowns. I would like to see more, inside routes where you're talking 10 to 15 yards instead of 55 to 60 yards. Right. So we'll see there. The other one that I find really interesting, and it's just so much of it is to do with health. Juwan Johnson, 425 receiving yards, 4.5 receiving touchdowns. Now I'm taking the over on touchdowns, but I'm not touching that receiving yards line. I just can't. I just genuinely can't do it because I just don't know how much he's going to be involved in. Is he going to be healthy? I don't know.
Right. It's tough right now just because we're off to a bad start already with that, considering his, coming back from an injury. So I would feel safer taking the under there than I would the over on the yardage. And I'll go under on the touchdowns too, just because I think there's just a lot of mouths to feed, and I'm not exactly sure his involvement.
But there's not a lot of mouths to feed at tight end.
That's very true, right?
So if he is on the field, you would imagine that he should eclipse both of those numbers.
I just don't know right now when he's going to be on the field.
No, and when you're a bigger guy and you start to have foot injuries, it's never a good sign, and you could say, hey, it's maybe it's a one-off, but he dealt with a calf injury all last year. Now you're dealing with the foot. I don't know. I don't trust it. And then, it's tough to find lines on rookies, but whatever Dallin Holker goes off at in the preseason, assuming he's on the roster, I'm probably betting the over on that. Just because I'm not confident in Juwan, but man, who knows? Maybe he'll prove me wrong.
What a difference a year makes, because I know everybody, after seeing what Juwan did at camp, we were like, oh man, pick him up in fantasy football. And now this year it's kind of like, well, I don't know.
If he's healthy in camp, I'm sure people will say the same thing. So we'll find out. But okay, so only, it's the annoying thing is I can never find defensive betting lines. It's tough. One of the only defensive betting lines I was able to find was Kool-Aid McKinstry over under 1.5 interceptions in his rookie season. I'm betting the under, but that's just because I think it's really difficult to see where he gets on the field consistently right now. But I was surprised to see that line at all. And there's a few lines that we'll talk about in the next segment of like defensive player of the year, or defensive rookie of the year that he's in. And I'm trying to figure out what would have to happen for him to win defensive rookie of the year. But either way, I think those lines are kind of indicative of like how much confidence people have in you. Not so much like whether it's likely to happen, but the fact that you appear on the list at all is a good sign. But hey.
Yeah, that's a good question though, too, because obviously Lattimore, Debo, and then the question for me is obviously Alontae Taylor, who's dealing with an injury currently. I don't think, we've been made to believe that it's nothing that serious. And I'm with you. If I'm not quite sure how much playing time we're going to see for Kool-Aid year 1.5 interceptions. It's, getting acclimated your rookie season. We'll have to see, but I would definitely tend to lean towards the under there as well. I'm guessing, your guy like a Lattimore, a Debo, even Tyrann Mathieu would probably have your higher range numbers considering for picks.
Yeah, there's a couple special Saints bets that I was able to look up on FanDuel, and one of them is Tyrann Mathieu, 5+ interceptions. You can get that at plus 600 odds. Now,
that's a lot.
But we have seen Tyrann be kind of that interception guy for the Saints, and how many did he have last year? He had 4 last year, so he was one off. Can he be that guy again? He had, in his 2 years with the Saints, he's had 7 interceptions. So is number 5 on the table? Because if it is, that's plus 600. That's it's a $10 bet to win $60. You could get there. You could get to 5. I'm taking, if it was at 3.5, that's a question. And I think that's probably what you would need to get even odds is 3.5. Because he had 3 in 2022, he had 4 in 2023. That's tough to do year over year.
And I just looked real quick. His career, he's only gone 5 or more twice in his career.
But he has done it. And
Yes.
it wasn't that long ago. It was 2020. He had 6 interceptions with the Chiefs in 15 games. So he can get there. I think there's a lot of long odds bets that you can look at down the line. And I don't know, like if I'm trying to find if someone, and the way I kind of look at it, and this is the way I'm going to phrase it on some of these other bets. If someone handed you $100 and said, this is a free bet, but you can only take something with like odds of like plus 400 or better. I don't know. The 5 interceptions bet, I feel like is a reasonable one to potentially win big on.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be comfortable though. I'd take the under there. Just like I said, it's only done it twice.
But it's not an over under. It's not over or under 5. It is 5 or more. So like you can't bet under 5. You can only bet.
I wouldn't bet then because I don't think he does it.
It's a situational bet. Yeah. Well, that's kind of the other thing. But we'll go through this list of all of these long odds bets, and we'll see how you feel about it when we get to the end of it. But there's a few others. Here's one that we can get. So there's a couple here. So Alvin Kamara, 5+ rushing touchdowns and 5+ receiving touchdowns. You can get it at plus 650. So
man,
it's a tough one, but we have seen him do that. I mean, he had 6 rushing touchdowns in one game before. So, for a long odds bet, so let's see how many times has he actually done that. So I was going to say that's when the offense was cooking though. He's had 5+ rushing touchdowns in 5 of his 7 seasons, including last year. And he has had 5+ receiving touchdowns in 3 different seasons. He's only had 3 over the last 2 seasons. So the only difficulty I have there is, okay, how many rushing touchdowns does Taysom Hill steal from him?
Sure. Or even Jamal.
But I don't know. Like if he has a good season, 5 rushing touchdowns is nothing significant. The question is receiving touchdowns. And I don't know. So here's my question. There's 2 lines here. You can get Alvin Kamara 5+ rushing touchdowns and 5+ receiving touchdowns for plus 650, or you could get Alvin Kamara 10+ rushing touchdowns at plus 750. Which would you take?
I'd take the first bet.
You'd take 5 and 5 over 10?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because I feel like if you look back at Alvin's career, he's done the 10+ rushing touchdowns thing twice. He had 16 in 2020. He had 14 in 2018. He had 8 as a rookie in 2017. My issue with that is Taysom Hill.
Sure.
And Jamal. Jamal didn't do much, vulturing last year, but Taysom Hill, I mean, in terms of Alvin Kamara touchdown, Alvin probably sets that record that he set last year with like career rushing touchdowns for the Saints. He probably does it like 2 years earlier if it's not for Taysom Hill existing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I'm looking at the numbers too now. Man, 14 rushing touchdowns in 18, 16 in 2020. I missed that, Alvin.
Right. Okay, one more, and this is a Chris Olave one we didn't hit, but it's Chris Olave to score 10+ receiving touchdowns. You can get it at plus 340. So his over/under is 4.5. 10+. You could get good odds on it. Would you take it? Well, would you take that, or would you take either of those Alvin bets?
I'd probably be more comfortable with the Olave bet, honestly, just because I'm worried about Kamara and the age factor, and I think with Chris being the dude, the number one, no question. Although Alvin's definitely still the number one running back in this group as well. I just think that, man, it's this offense should be, and I think will be, feeding Olave a lot more.
I would look at it differently in that. Okay, so I agree with you in the sense that Chris Olave, I think, has a better chance of having an offensive player of the year type season than Alvin Kamara does. That said, if you're going to say that Chris is going to catch 1,500 yards and 10+ touchdowns, why not just vote him for offensive player of the year? Because you could get those odds at plus 7,500. Chris Olave, Offensive Player of the Year. Because if you're talking double-digit touchdowns, 1,500 yards, I don't know. Like that does feel like an Offensive Player of the Year type season. That said, it's tough for a wide receiver. So if I'm betting Chris there, I'm also taking Offensive Player of the Year for Chris.
Fair enough. Yeah, for sure.
Because that would be a monster season. Like that would be a crazy season. 10 plus touchdowns from a wide receiver position and however many yards. Because that's just going to mean he is the offense.
I mean, in the receiving game, it definitely feels like that, and it'll be interesting to see. I don't see anyone vulturing, catches away from Chris.
Yeah, I mean Alvin, in terms of like close yardage, like in terms of the touchdown type.
Yeah,
like that's my only problem with Chris in terms of the touchdowns is how many is he going to get in the red zone? Like how much attention is he going to get once you get to the red zone? When you saw last year that the Saints' success in the red zone was dictated by we're running the ball in the red zone. We're getting it down close to the line of scrimmage, to the goal line, and then go from there. So I don't know, but either way, it would be nice. I would be over the moon if you got 10 plus touchdowns from Chris Olave.
Yeah, I just did a real quick look. Guys with 10 touchdowns a year ago: Jordan Addison, Amon St. Ra, Cortland Sutton, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Mike Evans.
Cortland Sutton had 10 touchdowns last year?
Pretty crazy, right?
Man. I know Amon Ra had a great season. Who was the other one? Who was the first one?
Jordan Addison.
Jordan Addison, a rookie. Yeah.
Yeah, 911 yards, 10 touchdowns for him. We'll see what happens there with the new QB.
And without Kirk Cousins for a majority of the season.
Right.
That's impressive. Good for him. Good for Jordan. We'll see how he does without a quarterback now. But all right, that's it for the individuals. We got a lot of interesting lines on like offensive rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year, MVP, stuff like that. Saints don't have any real candidates for any of those, but we'll talk about it. And
I'd figure Dennis would be on the list of coaches, the first coach to get fired list.
I see. I don't have that. That's not a prop bet that I have, but I would actually bet against that.
Me too, honestly. But I'm just saying, I know perception though is, and they're like, he'd probably be top 3 or 4. I would guess.
Well, here's the thing. And when we can just kind of hit this now before we move on. I disagree because the Saints aren't really firing people in. Like, I don't see a scenario where Dennis gets fired in season. And because why would you? What's the benefit of doing it?
I don't know where you would go then too. All of a sudden you fire Dennis, and who do you make the interim head coach?
Right. Well, I just think I don't even know if it's about that. I don't even know if it's about interim versus like better options, whatever. I just think this front office and this organization when's the last time they actually did that? Like,
right, they'll see it through.
Exactly. Like they're not gonna overreact. I mean, they're patient. You can say anything you want about this front office. You cannot say they are impatient. They are patient to a fault. Like they will wait it out forever. And it's to the point that it's driving fans crazy. But if you're going to make a bet, I wouldn't throw money on them firing anybody in season. I just wouldn't. So, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, every once in a while you get those emails and it's like first coach to get fired NBA, first coach to get fired NFL. I just feel like the odds makers would put Dennis in that list. Although I agree with you, I don't think that they're quick to obviously pull the trigger on anything here.
You know who I could see getting fired midseason if we want to just talk about some coaches I could fire midseason? Brian Daboll, Giants.
Yeah.
Kevin Stefanski. Because and part of it is like both of these coaching staffs or both of these front offices are more than willing to fire a coach midseason, and both have made the playoffs and really kind of fallen flat on their face when they did it. You know, whereas the Giants actually won a playoff game, but then they lost in such a fashion to the Eagles that you lose all grace. What was it, 35-0, something like that?
I forget, but yes, around that, yeah.
That was brutal. I went to the bar to watch that game with a Giants fan friend of mine, and we were just so mad the entire game. Like if the Giants start like 1-6, gone.
Yeah, I would wonder. I'm trying to think of a team that you know, the coaches coming into this year already on the hot seat. You obviously mentioned
not the Raiders. You typically look at the Raiders. I think Antonio Pierce is safe for at least 1 year. You're not Jim Harbaugh is a new coach. Like Brandon Staley was that guy for the last several years. So you're not talking about him. Doug Peterson, I could see just because of how last season ended. Oh, here's one. Nick Sirianni.
Oh man, Philly, if he's really under the hot seat after that 10-1 start, and then who knows what happened with that utter collapse.
Yeah, when your season ends the way it did, if you come into the next season and you're not showing signs that was a one-off, and you're seeing more of that, especially with that Philly market, that Philly media,
and all the money they've pumped in, Jalen Hurts, the wide receivers. I mean, the running back, they spent a ton. So there's a lot of heat there for sure.
Yeah, if they start flat, if the Saints beat them week 2, people are gonna freak the F out. And I'm here for it. I'm here for it. I hope it happens because he's an easy guy to hate. We talk about easy guys to hate. Nick Sirianni is probably the top of that list.
Yeah, he's definitely I would think high atop the NFL douche list for coaches.
Yeah, and he's also got that like no Sean Moreno style like crying clip. It's like anyway. That's the only thing I remember. Like, no, Sean Moreno was a solid player, but the only thing I remember about him is that gif of like it almost looks like it was like that was Visine, right? That couldn't possibly be real tears. Like it looks like a torrential downpour. Oh man, this is off the rails. But all right, we're gonna come back. We're gonna go through some interesting prop bets, some season-long bets for the Saints, and then we are gonna close out. I want to do a mailbag this week at some point because I feel like we haven't done a mailbag in forever. But we'll talk about that when we come back. All right, this is Inside Black and Gold. Who dat? And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. One more segment. Steve, you mentioned that you during the break you went and looked to see who that next coach fired could be. Who was it?
And Jets, Robert Saleh, like we kind of said, no surprise really there considering all they've invested. And, meanwhile, Rodgers too busy to come to mandatory minicamp. Not a good look already for this season for them.
Unless you're Sauce Gardner. And then,
also, Hassan Riddick, I saw was in Japan playing cosplay instead of being at mandatory minicamp.
Good stuff. That's good stuff.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. Well, I do kind of feel like it's like Robert Saleh is the placeholder for like if you're not going to hire someone and then say here's Aaron Rodgers, right? It's kind of like LeBron in that way.
Yeah.
Like he's like we're going to stick with you until we don't, and if we don't, then that means that it's all gone. Everything we're tearing all the posters off the walls and starting from scratch. Just like we talked previously about like. I don't even know when I think this was just during practice. Like they still have the Compete Street signs up at the Saints facility. Like that's kind of how it feels with like once you end the Dennis Allen era, for example, everything comes down. All the Sean Payton stuff goes away.
Yes. But
right now you're still in it. You still have this like last vestiges of it. And like the Compete Street sign at the Saints facility is one of those things. Like a new coach is going to come in and be like, what the fuck is this? Like why? What does that even mean? This is dumb. Get this out of my face. And
it's probably like, yeah, whatever.
That's kind of how I feel with Robert Saleh. Of like, it's like if you wanted to move on from Robert Saleh, you wouldn't do it and keep anything that he had in place, and that would involve Aaron Rodgers and all that. So I think Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh are tied together. And even when Aaron retires, like even if it goes well, I think you're just like, all right, Robert, we're done with this.
Move it on.
But all right, no, we're gonna close out this betting episode with some fun bets, and so. Saints to win the Super Bowl. It's plus 8,000.
Wow.
Saints are tied for 23rd. They're tied with the Vikings. I'm not betting that.
Ouch.
Not betting that. To win the NFC South, Saints to win the NFC South, they're plus 340. They're ranked third behind the Bucks at plus 300. And then the Falcons at minus 115. Now, I don't have an issue with people talking about the Saints and the Bucks and saying I don't have any confidence in them, whatever. My only issue is that everyone is so sold on the Falcons that you're giving up odds on this bet. It's a reverse odds bet. You're betting $10 to win 850, right?
Yeah, like Cousins is a good quarterback. Come on, he's not a franchise changer.
Exactly. We're talking about this team as if they are a layup, surefire 10 wins playoffs team. Get the fuck out of here. No. What have you watched? This team hasn't won more than 7 games since 2016.
Yeah, to me, that's not a bad bet for the Saints if you want to take them to win the NFC South.
Well, and again, like, sure, maybe they do go out and win the NFC South. My issue is the confidence level that everyone seems to have that the Falcons are going to be this juggernaut of the NFC South. They're the only team we're talking about in the NFC South because of Kirk Cousins, because of this guy who has literally been league average his entire NFL career. Why?
I don't get it either. Yeah,
a 37-year-old dude coming off a torn Achilles. What, 37?
They look at his weapons.
Is he really? Is he 37? Did I make that up?
I think he's 35.
I've aged him a year. I think he's 35. He will turn 36 in August. So he will be 36 by the time next season starts. He's coming off a torn Achilles. This is your king? I don't know. That's the only thing I like. And again, like, you want to say they're the favorite to win the NFC South. Sure. But by that much, that's insane. Come on.
Well, just wait till after week 1 if they lay an egg, and all of a sudden it's like, bring in Penix.
Well, it does remind me of the Saints last year of, like, everyone was all in love with the Derek Carr, and then suddenly Derek Carr was Derek Carr. And everyone's like, well, what happened? Like, I mean, Derek Carr is the same guy. Like, it's not like he'd change. Like, this idea that he showed up and didn't play the way that you should have expected him to play is the part that doesn't make sense. Like, he ended up at, like, his career averages at the end of the season. But I give him credit too, because he was obviously dealing with something with that shoulder all year long. I don't even care about that. I just care about this overhype thing that happens with new quarterbacks in new systems. And then when they deliver where you should have expected, suddenly they're a disappointment. That's what annoys me.
I think, last year everyone kept saying, and I feel like the message was, oh, the Falcons are just a quarterback away from being a real contender. They went out and got that quarterback. I think obviously Cousins is an upgrade from a year ago, but I'm not so sure that he does put them over the top in this division.
I also don't think they were a quarterback away from being a contender. I think you have to have a good defense for that to be the truth.
Right. There's no mention of that at all.
They don't have a pass rush. Why don't we ever talk about the pass rush that they decided not to build? All these defensive players they brought in with a different defensive coordinator. Why don't we talk about that? No.
No, for whatever reason, like you said, folks are in love with Kirk Cousins, and they think Bijan's going to have this miraculous, huge leap in year 2.
I think Bijan's going to be great. But so was Saquon Barkley with the Giants. How many games did they win?
Right.
Like, you need more. No,
I think the Saints are more able to compete with the reigning NFC South champs Tampa than Atlanta will be. But once again, we shall see.
Either way, that's my rant. It's like, I'll give you the Saints should not be the favorites in the NFC South. Don't Agreed. Give me this 10.5 win Falcons team. Okay, moving to offensive rookie of the year. Saints have a couple names on this list. Can you guess who they are? You should be able to, because there's only like 3.
I'm guessing that Kool-Aid will be on there.
Offensive rookie of the year.
Offensive rookie of the year.
Kool-Aid wins offensive rookie of the year. That's something.
That's really impressive. Yeah. Who are the 3 players they got for offensive rookie of the year?
Spencer Rattler is the top odds.
Oh, Lord.
He's plus 10,000. I was going
to say, forget it. I'm putting my money back in my wallet.
Caleb Williams is obviously the top. Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr. But yeah, Spencer Rattler is the Saints' top betting odds guy for offensive rookie of the year, plus 10,000. I mean, to be fair, no one on the Saints is winning offensive rookie of the year. The only person who could is probably Spencer, because that would mean, I don't know, Derek Carr gets hurt in week 3. They turn to Spencer and he has like a Brock Purdy type season. Like, I'm not telling you that's going to happen, but in the sense of like who could win, that makes I get it. Dallin Holker is second at plus 25,000.
Damn.
Which again, it's another example of like, okay, what if Jawan, his foot injury lingers all year and Dallin is your only option and he goes for 1,000 yards? He ends up being like a Sam Laporta last year. Sure. The final one, Taliesin Fuaga plus 30,000, which I'm not going to look it up, but I have a feeling that it's been a while since an offensive lineman has won any of these awards, or defensive line, because you can get sacks and stuff like this. Like defensive line as a defensive rookie of the year is like, yeah, sure, that makes sense. Offensive line, it's impossible because there's no stats. How good can you be? Like what can you do as an offensive lineman to win offensive rookie of the year? I don't know if it's possible.
No love for Bub Means, huh?
No, I was surprised by that. But no, Bub Means was not on this. These are all from DraftKings for what it's worth.
Okay.
Defensive rookie of the year. The favorites are Latu Latu, Quinyon Mitchell, Jared Verse. Kool-Aid McKinstry is number 1 for the Saints. He's number 13th overall at plus 3,500. And I think he's the only option, because I didn't find Jalen Ford. I didn't find some of these other guys. So yeah, we'll see. But if you're throwing money at a problem, maybe Kool-Aid is the answer. I wouldn't hate that bet.
No, definitely. Of everything you've mentioned, I'd be more inclined to bet on the defensive side of the ball there, because I don't like any of the offensive options.
No, well, you're not gonna like.
I think Fuaga, I'm sure will have a great year. But yeah, what do you have to do to win offensive rookie of the year as an O lineman? It was a great point.
I don't think it's possible. I genuinely don't. And it's almost always a quarterback anyway. So, how bad would the quarterbacks? That's the real question: is how bad would the quarterbacks have to be for the offensive lineman to win? And it couldn't be one of their offensive linemen. So if you didn't like those bets, you're definitely not going to like the MVP bets.
Man, those odds makers are pushing that Spencer Rattler narrative.
Yeah, they sure are. Derek Carr, MVP, plus 15,000. He's tied with Bo Nix and Will Levis for that.
Oh, Lord.
How sad is that?
That's insulting.
It is insulting. I hope Derek's insulted by that. He's tied with Will Levis. At least the rookie, if the rookie came out and just balled out and went crazy, like you could be like, wow, it's amazing. But Will Levis?
Right, you have him on the same plane as Will Levis? Please.
That's tough. That's a tough one. He's behind Justin Fields.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, Pat Mahomes is obviously the favorite. You got Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert up there toward the top. Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave are also on that list at plus 40,000. So if you think this is the year, go hammer that plus 40,000 line.
Man, I sure would love it.
All right. Offensive player of the year, you got Chris Olave plus 75, Kamara plus 8,000, Taysom Hill plus 20,000, Derek Carr plus 20,000, Rashid Shaheed plus 25,000, which good for him for being on that list at all. And then the one I found really funny, Michael Thomas is on that list with the Saints. It's only valid if he goes back to the Saints. He's on that list at plus 25,000. You want to talk about burning money?
Yeah, you can scratch that one off immediately.
Defensive player of the year, Chase Young is the highest odds for the Saints.
Wow,
at plus 10,000. So they fell into that thirst trap.
Crap, is DeMario after that?
Yes.
Okay.
Marshawn Lattimore is the second at plus 12,000. Then DeMario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu at plus 15,000. Kool-Aid plus 25,000. So no Paulson and Debo. They just love some Kool-Aid. They just, I don't know. These folks love their Kool-Aid. They're drinking the Kool-Aid.
They're drinking the Kool-Aid, right?
But it's funny because if I had to bet one of those guys, I'd bet DeMario.
Absolutely. That's why I was like, wait a minute. What are you talking about, Chase Young?
I could see, if Marshawn went nuts and had 8 or 9 interceptions. It's just it's like linebacker, defensive end. It feels like those are the guys who win defensive player of the year. Yeah,
it'd have to be a hell of a campaign from Lattimore, like you mentioned. You get up there with those picks.
Yeah, there's really no one to talk about for comeback player of the year. Like I was trying to find a name, and I was like, this guy would make sense. Like Chase Young feels like the best option, and he wasn't played in the Super Bowl last year. How could he be?
Yeah, right.
Mike Thomas, even if Mike Thomas came back, I don't think he would be a valid comeback player of the year option. So the Saints don't really have a player like that. Maybe Ryan Ramczyk.
Yeah, that was the only one I was about to say. I was like, I don't know. Hopefully we get good news about Ramczyk, but right now,
Yeah. So either way, that's it. And then coach of the year, Dennis Allen is plus 6,000. He's ahead of only Kevin Stefanski. Now, here's the thing, and you're going to laugh. Of all of these bets that you could make, I think that's actually the most likely one to happen is Dennis Allen wins Coach of the Year. Okay, hear me out. So much of these is expectation versus reality.
Right.
And in this case, Dennis Allen is going to benefit from everyone agreeing that he's a bad coach, right? Like his expectations are so low that like just put out a scenario. Saints, everything goes right. Health goes right. The new offense hits. Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave all have great seasons. The defense is really good. Peyton Turner, Chase Young, stay healthy. The pass rush is there. Marshawn Lattimore has a bounce back season. Paulson Adebo has another good season. Alontae Taylor in the slot picks up where he left off, gets better. The safeties are doing their thing. You win 13 games. What are the expectations for the Saints? We're talking about how everyone's talking about the Falcons. Like, oh man, the Falcons. The Saints are pegged at 7.5 wins.
Right.
If they come out and they win 13 games in a weak NFC South, the Falcons suck. Couldn't you see him winning Coach of the Year?
I think they'll give all the credit to Kubiak.
Probably, but he's not going to. But that's my point. Is like you could bet Derek Carr to win MVP. I don't think there's anything Derek Carr could do to win MVP. Like I figure like, he would have to throw for 5,000 yards, 40 touchdowns. And even then, we've seen Drew Brees do that and not win MVP. So I just don't think there's anything you could do, right? Like offensive rookie of the year, no. Taliesin Fuanga's not doing that. Dallin Holker's not going to win that. Spencer Rattler's not going to play, right? Defensive rookie of the year, I just don't see Kool-Aid doing enough, right? Like offensive player of the year, all this stuff, like it's very difficult to win. Mike Thomas won offensive player of the year with his 149 catch season. What would Chris have to do to like? So I don't know. I'm just saying, like, if you again, it's a scenario. It's like I'm going to give you.
I hear you.
I'm going to give you $100 and let you bet any of these. Wouldn't you say that Dennis Allen winning Coach of the Year? Like, it's like, oh, would you rather say I'm going to bet them to win the Super Bowl?
No, I'm definitely putting my money on winning the NFC South, but that's not in the conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, like, then there's some other coaches in the same scenario, but like Kevin Stefanski is last on the list because what more could he do than last year? Like, you lost your quarterback, brought in Joe Flacco. How can you follow that up? You find an even older quarterback, pull Peyton Manning out of retirement and see what he's got left?
You turn Jameis Winston into a bona fide starter.
There it is. There it is. You win 12 games to get to the playoffs with Jameis as your starter. That's how you win Coach of the Year.
They definitely got the defense over there, so definitely curious to see what happens with Cleveland.
Well, that's another thing. It's like, yeah, when you have the defense and the expectations of that it's a dominant defense, it's tough to, it's like you got to get back to the playoffs. Like the standards are so high. That's why Dennis Allen, it's like you look at it and you laugh. But the Saints make a return to the playoffs. Like, what if they end up just everything goes right, get the top seed in the NFC? Like, it's feasible that it could happen. And that's all I need on a plus $6,000 because all I need to do is bet $10 to win $600. A few others, Saints score one touchdown in every regular season game and plus 200 odds. I don't know. It's not a terrible bet. I think the only game they didn't score a touchdown last year was against the Falcons.
Yeah, I wonder how common that is of being able to score a touchdown in every game.
Well, I mean, the Saints did it for like 3 years straight. I mean, like Drew Brees had that record.
The helm.
Like, it sounds easy until you get to that one game where Taysom fumbles at the 1 yard line and you're like, oh, it was that close. Like, that's how you would have lost that bet. They scored a touchdown every other game. And it's not like offensive touchdown either. It could be a defensive touchdown. It could be a special teams touchdown.
Right. Just 6.
12 or 17. Oh, 6 points. Yeah. Anyway, we talked about Chris Olave. Saints sweep the Falcons plus 430. I'm probably going to bet that just on principle.
Not a terrible bet, right?
Derek Carr to throw 35 plus passing touchdowns plus 750.
I'm staying away from it.
He has never thrown for 30 touchdowns. Oh, he threw for 30 touchdowns once. It was in 2015. It was his second year in the NFL. His next highest total is 28, and that was in 2016. So yeah, that's a tough one. Things would have to real go right. Saints score one field goal in every game. Plus 2,200. That's kind of crazy. You would think that would be more likely than that. Now I got to look at Blake Grupe. How many games did he actually kick a field goal in?
And yeah, then it's like, obviously you have to make the field goal too.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It was funny because he kicked a field goal in the first 11 games of the season. And in the 11th game, he kicked 5. He had 6 attempts. And then he did not attempt a field goal in the next game. He didn't make a field goal against the Panthers. He missed his only attempt. So after a game where he hit 5 field goals, he did not hit another field goal again for 3 weeks. And then he had 1 against the Giants, and he did not kick against the Rams. So he had hit 5 field goals in week 12, or sorry, week 11. And then he only made 1 field goal for a month. It's just strange. But yeah, so that would have been, you would have felt really good about that bet until you got to week 12 and
curses.
And then the Saints were down like 21-0 in the first quarter of the game. Like, you're probably not going to settle for field goals.
No, and they give them credit. They made it a game, but too little, too late.
Yeah, they should have won that game. But all right. Saints score a touchdown and a field goal in every game is plus 6,500. That's tough. And the Saints score a rushing touchdown in every game is plus 25,000, which that's weird to me. You'd think that would be lower. But hey, if you really love Alvin, if you think this is offensive player of the year, Alvin, there you go.
Well, also, obviously, Mr. QB option there with Taysom Hill getting those carries. And you're hoping, obviously, Jamal can be more of that Detroit Lions final season Jamal than he was last year.
It's not a terrible bet to me. Like if you're throwing 10, like again, you're talking about throwing $10 at that line,
right?
25,000, and you're gonna be like, run it. They get to the 1, and you're like, you better fucking run it in. Saints go undefeated. You can get plus 100,000. So was that a $10 bet to win $10,000?
I'll just get my dollar bill out and ignite it.
Right. Yeah. $1 bet to win $1,000. Not a terrible odd. Saints go winless plus 42,000. Saints as the a more realistic idea. Saints as the last unbeaten team. They're the 24th best odds or 24th worst odds. I don't know. It's always confusing how you want to phrase it. Plus 7,500. And then the Saints as the last winless team. They have the 10th best odds at plus 2,200. That's what I got.
That's all tough, those last ones, just because, this seems like a very mid team. And I think that's odds makers, 7.5 wins on the year. I'm more in the 8-9 range. I take the over on that. So, but that's still, middle of the pack squad. I don't think they're going to be the last to be winless and the last to be undefeated. So
when you have the Panthers in week 1, it's going to be tough to win that bet of being the last winless team.
Hopefully, right? We don't need to see. There's a few folks calling for, year 2 of Bryce Young's going to, really turn things around. I'm like, okay, we shall see how that goes.
Well, we can close this out as the week 1 line on the Saints Panthers is Saints -5. So
I'll take the Saints.
They better win the game.
Yeah, they better win is right.
You want things to get ugly real fast? Lose to the Panthers in week 1.
You still tons of questions. Obviously, O-line, what they're going to do as receiving options. I know they did, obviously draft Leggett, but I don't even know what their run game is. It looks like.
Yep, and I'm going to go back to it. You want the best chance of winning a bet? Go take Dennis Allen plus 6,000, Coach of the Year. There's just not a lot of positive sounding bets for the Saints.
I was going to say, the more you go into other bets, I was like, that doesn't sound so insane.
Doesn't sound so bad anymore, right? Doesn't sound so crazy. But all right.
If that happens, remember, you heard it here first.
Yeah, I'm not betting it. But hey, let's wrap up this episode. You can go throw your money into a furnace somewhere, and we'll have the same result. This is Inside Black and Gold. We went through a lot of these bets thanks to FanDuel, Bet365, DraftKings, Betting Pros. I think that's all of them for all of these lines, and we will be coming back later in the week with another episode. Probably do a mailbag. I don't know when. My problem with the mailbags, and this is just for anyone still listening, they probably do care about the schedule. My problem with the mailbags is like you host a show every afternoon. So like I don't want to do noon mailbags on a weekday. But
it's a little tough, right?
Maybe that's better than nothing. I don't know. Maybe we'll try one and see what happens.
Maybe we could do like an after show mailbag.
What does that mean?
Like when I get out, the show ends at 8 and then.
Yeah, that's the other option is like a super late mailbag.
Might be more, drum up some more folks.
Yeah, I just don't like staying awake that late.
No, I hear you. There's nothing else to watch on TV, so it's like I'm going to bed.
That is true. There's nothing competing for your attention. So maybe that's how we can do it. Maybe we can do one late mailbag this week, and then next week is the holiday, and I'll be gone, so we'll have one episode, and that's it. But
enjoy that time off for show.
Yeah, this is always the time of year where it's like, there's no news. So we're just like, what the hell are we going to talk about for an hour? And we end up with a bunch of numbers thrown at you.
And ridiculous bets that no one's making.
Yeah. If one person listening makes that bet on Coach of the Year, I'll shout you out in person. Let me know. But all right. Who dat? Go Saints. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be hitting you back later in the week. Steve's still reacclimating from his vacation. He was punching sharks for a couple days out in Florida.
Back from the beach. That's the good life right there.
Mm-hmm. And I'm getting ready to go the other direction. I'm driving left. You drove right. I'm going to drive left.
Okay.
And I'll let you know how it looks over there. But all right. Who dat? Be easy, y'all. Peace.
Take care, everyone.